Hello and welcome to this podcast of Finding Serenity. This episode is going to look at black and white thinking, how to spot it, what it is, and maybe how to identify it, become aware of it, and navigate through it to help find serenity. So, Rhonda is joining me. It's me and Rhonda here. And I would like to know, Rhonda, when did you first hear that come into your consciousness?
I think I first heard about that in graduate school, really when I was learning about borderline personality disorder,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that there is a lot of black and white thinking in personality disorders.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then did you consider it just as like something you'd encounter in future clients after you made it through graduate school, or did you ever consider how it affected your life? Do you consider it?
I didn't really consider it about how it impacted my life till I was in therapy, and my
Right,
therapist pointed it out to me.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got introduced to it, I think, in treatment. Like it's pretty much like basic treatment 101. Here's a list of what they call cognitive distortions. And it's just something to stare at, be unable to tie to my own life, and then file underneath other handouts while I go smoke cigarettes in treatment, you know? And it wasn't really until kind of getting serious about recovery, which was like unearthing belief systems. And, part of recovery is sharing, who and what I'm pissed at and trying to figure out how I see the world. And it became pretty clear that if I wasn't going to use drugs and alcohol to like avoid life, that the work presented like in 12-step recovery or in therapy was like going to be like, let's look at what is going on in you. Your thinking needs to change. And so some of they call them like cognitive distortions, all or nothing thinking, disqualifying the positive, emotional reasoning, worst case scenario thinking. There's a whole slew of them. And I think every human has them because I know that. But I think I don't know, most humans think they're right about stuff. And it's like a prison to have black and white thinking. There's no nuance to it. Go ahead.
Well, I think that most humans, do have them too, but I think that in the disease of addiction, in the population of people that are impacted by the disease of addiction, I think that it is wildly above the average. I think,
Oh, yeah.
people that struggle with addiction have absolute thinking. And I think people who are just impacted by the disease, like I'm in Al Anon and I am impacted by black and white thinking for
Well,
sure.
can you give some examples maybe of how you now see black and white thinking is one of your issues? You've talked about this alcoholic marriage you were in. And can you like point out where you saw things black and white and weren't even aware? Do you know?
Well, I'd have to think about that, but I mean, I have a good example, but have a very simple example. I mean,
Perfect.
this because it impacts my life on a daily basis. I
Hmm.
mean, for example, if I texted a friend to go have coffee and my friend did not respond right away, I could easily think they don't like me. They don't want to spend time with me instead of, oh, they might be busy and haven't got my text yet, you know? And
Imagine that, right?
yeah, right. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that is really and the thing about that is, with the absolute thinking and the all or nothing thinking, is it directly I mean, we've talked this with this bondage yourself and how it leads to not feeling very serene. But if you start having a thought like, they don't like me, I'm not good enough, it's gonna be a crappy day, that really will directly take your mood into a very negative place.
So
And it
that's like a new awareness cue or trigger, negative mind frame.
and I think
Something
that,
happened. And this is
go ahead.
bad. This person did something to me and it's bad. Or I'm not, this, it's like things are either bad or good.
Right, and I mean, I think that that's we talked about helping people identify when they're having black and white or absolute thinking, and it's those words, bad, never, always. Those kinds of words are, if you can become aware when you're using those words, then you can probably stop your negative thinking.
So that's it. I'm glad you brought that up. So bad, negative, always, never, should, must. And the other one I like is but because,
Like a yes, but
yeah, The but kind of goes back to some of what we talked about with cognitive dissonance, doubling down on my old idea. Yeah, yeah, but, and then we're back on the old fixed idea, the absolute, and I think you can go too, is I think that I'm the last person to know I'm self-righteous, right? Because I'm right, and then I'm not free, and then I think if they would just change or do as I please or do things the way I do, I'd be okay. People told me things early on in recovery that I thought sounded deep, and I didn't know what they meant, but, like, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. I'm like, "That I don't understand." Now I have a better understanding of that, and it's like, if I'm right, that means you're wrong. But my little unhealthy ego pride will be like, no, yeah, you're allowed your opinion, but there's no buts about it. I'm either allowing you to have a different opinion and not agree with it, or I'm right and you're wrong, And there's just funny ways to look at it. Well, I'd agree with you, Rhonda, but then we'd both be wrong. That's you know? But, yeah, I guess
It's not very welcoming, like, people if you're interacting with somebody and you are using words like that, there is a social consequence because it's kind of offensive.
it really is. And I think that part of the bondage itself, even if we just eliminated other people and how they kind of stir us up, is I've done bad. Therefore, I am bad. Therefore, possibility of change does not exist, And it's this self made prison. I'm writing myself a prescription to stay drunk, miserable, and a self pitying victim. But I do think that the distortions most people do have and how it affects their life is a little different, I guess, for everybody. But then they look deeper at belief systems, which are really hard. That's where the musts and the shoulds come in. And so yeah, the black and white thinking, the phone call, that's a good thing. They didn't answer. So it's either they don't like me or they're never available.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Nobody answers my calls.
They should answer it right away.
They should answer it right away. And then I don't see any of the gray area and the possibility where my freedom and serenity might, maybe they're busy, right? Maybe they have an emergency. Have I ever not called or answered the phone right away? Like that's a head scratcher. Like it's this giant aha. I
Do you
was
see all those prisms in my camera? Can
I might have shared this before, but I was in this Zoom meeting a couple of years ago, and this woman's kind of, in my mind, droning on a little bit. But she says at one point, like I hear, I'm not really paying much attention. And I hear her say, I've got one of those brains and minds that goes either to A or to Z.
Oh,
I perked up because I say a prayer every morning. I say, God, please remove my black and white and all or nothing thinking, because it's kind of my default. I'm right, you're wrong. This is bad. I shouldn't have to. And then she was like, but I'm starting to get awareness of it. And what I'm realizing is when I'm in A or Z, there's 24 other letters of the alphabet.
that's nice.
And it was like, yeah. And if I really wanted to be serene, I might look at B through Y, and use instead of but, always, never, should, must, use things like perhaps or and,
The
or
gray is very nice. I mean, it is. It's a nice place to be. It's not like gray is not like purgatory. I mean, gray is a nice place to be. And language is powerful. A lot of this is about language, the language that you're using, and it does create a reality that can seal your serenity
it
for sure.
does. And that's the whole thing, I think. The reality is the key word to me is maybe I am right. And they should answer the phone. And they shouldn't have done that to me. But like who's miserable? Me. And it's like, what am I going to do? Call them up? Now I could call them up in a healthy way, but like, what am I going to do? I'm going to be spun out and miserable, creating this story of suffering. And I think what happens is a lot of times people think that using and perhaps is like excusing bad behavior, or it turns me into some doormat. And I know that's not true. And I've had that go on with some things that have kind of continued to bug me in my life. And I get this the kind of gross, icky belief of mine is like, how dare you make me work my program and practice compassion and accountability when you're not doing it? And then it becomes this scorekeeping exercise, and I'm back in victimhood. Is like rather than like, hey, this is just what these people are doing. They're not doing it to me, you know? And if it's really upsetting, you know, why am I friends with someone who never picks up the phone? You know, is that even true? You know? And so I don't know why we're wired this way, is to be kind of like maybe I think wired to create a story of suffering. And black and white thinking almost ensures that. Because again, even if I am right, how does my belief allow me to navigate reality? You know, anti-Semitism and homophobia are bad. Way to go, JD. You're a really open minded man. What are you going to go do? Start a crusade and convert anti Semites and homophobes into loving, compassionate people? Like, have fun with that, JD. It's not going to work. You know, maybe these people were raised that way. I don't need everybody to agree. It's folly to think I'm going to go change the world. You know, maybe they're sick. You know, perhaps they're sick. You know, even deeper might be, okay, JD, you're not closed minded about gay marriage or homophobia or racism, but what are you closed minded about? Well, I don't want to look at that, you know? But if I want to be free from the bondage of self, I might. But it's a damage to this already fragile ego to admit wrong, you know?
I think also, this is related, accepting people as they are and not expecting them to fit into your mold also is very freeing, and brings you to a place that's ready. And let me just give you an example. You know, a lot of times my partner and I'll get frustrated with my partner because I feel like she's like responding to me loud. Okay. And I don't like that. I don't like to have someone respond to me loud. But, the thing is that my partner, sometimes she likes to be loud, and that's who she is. And if I can not just get, mad because she's being loud and just say, "Oh, she's loud and she's boisterous, and that's one of the fun things about her," then I don't get angry, and I don't get frustrated because I'm not trying to pigeonhole her into something that she's not. And I mean, that kind of is like black and white thinking because I'm expecting her to be pigeonholed into what I would like, how I view the world. And that's not a beautiful thing, but it is a beautiful thing to accept someone as they are
It
with
really
their good things and their bad things.
right. And then taking it further back to myself is I want to be extended grace and mercy and compassion, you know. And I joke around about this all the time. It's now the World Cup is on. I'm like, it's usually about every 4 years I'll consider that I perhaps might anger other people. They might have problems with with me, you know. I never consider that. It's so rare, you know. And in a healthy way, it's good, you know. But these things like no is a complete sentence. We don't have to accept unacceptable behavior. There's a lot more nuance to it than the 4 or 5 words in the phrase, right? You know, unacceptable behavior to me really means you disagreeing with me. And that's not what that statement means, you know. And I have enough of my own unacceptable behavior, I guess I could work on or not. And it's just easier to go spend time complaining about everyone else's unacceptable behavior, you know? Yeah, I got a couple examples. I was in treatment with a guy who passed away and a couple months after we got out of treatment. And I was doing pretty good. And my friend who called me told me. And I was sad. I was stunned I didn't want to drink or do drugs, but I'd heard about a bunch of other things. I'd gotten some bad news in the first 3 or 4 months that people kind of walked me through, saved my life. But anyway, I just said to this guy, I was like, well, I'm going to go to the memorial service and tell his parents he was a good man. And then I made the mistake of telling my sponsor that. He's like, wow, JD, that takes courage. You don't like being around sadness. It's a sad event. And you told me you think his parents are awful. I was like, yeah, I told you that. I met him at the treatment center during the family program and they didn't smile. They were rude. And they need to know he was a good man. So my motives were good and there was no nuance to what I thought about this guy's parents. And miracle of miracles, I committed to this and then did it. You know, I had 3 weeks to wait till before the memorial service and I went. And I got there. I was like, you showed up. Who cares? You can leave now. And something just told me to keep staying. And I finally got through the long line of going up to them and I shook their hand and just said, you know, I don't know if you remember me, but I met you a few months ago. Your son helped me. He was a good man. And they're exhausted from this giant memorial service, but I didn't need anything from them. And I walked out of there feeling like 10 feet tall. And what I didn't know is one of the few times I ever honored my word to myself and did something hard. And then like 20 minutes into the drive back to my where I was living, it was like I'm getting drunk. And what I learned about that later on was that when you're starting to make progress, the disease of self tells you you're not with it, you know. But anyway, what I found out, I'm right. His parents are unsmiling, rich, jerks, not loving. I believe that, and I'm right. My boys in treatment saw it too. We're on Mike's side. Like, man, your parents are assholes. And just a little bit more work on this. This is why kind of resentment can, if you do some work on it, can look at your black and white thinking. I was like, my God. They've been to family programs probably 5 times. I don't need them to be smiling. I don't know how much money they've spent sending this guy to treatment. I don't know how many times they've had their hopes dashed. I don't know about the fear they have of having to raise their grandkids. I don't know about the fear they have at their country club of like thinking that their friends are judging and blaming them. And it blew my mind. I never consider any of those things.
Yeah.
You and then it, like, can lead to compassion and more of the truth, is like, I'm just gonna go judge someone because 'cause they're not smiling without any awareness that I spent most of treatment just screaming at people, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
it's hard, and then you kind of, I think this is why I think having a community is so helpful, is when you start to have these realizations, then instead of being like, "God, I was right about everything," I'm like, "I was wrong about everything. I'm a piece of garbage." And I'll use that as a prescription to stay miserable.
I think it's hard. It's hard to do all of these things. And I think that that's why black and white thinking and absolute thinking is so prevalent in this community where individuals do struggle with coping skills because black and white thinking, absolute thinking is very easy. It's very simple.
It
It's
is.
easy to fall into that.
It really is. And, I've talked to people and they're like, well, but I'm right. I'm like, you are right. Healthcare should be better in this country. But not everyone believes that. And it's not going to become better. How is it flying in the face of reality or not? And it becomes dishonest to be black and white, And the dishonesty is probably only hurting myself, but it's like, the black and white leads to more of what we talk about the bondage of self, arrogance, shame, self pity, victimhood, defensiveness. So it's like this thing. I think if I went through the day, my default to black and white typically. With a bunch of recovery, sometimes I don't on the fly. I would be like, oh wow, they're just having a bad day. Who cares? No big deal. And I think that's what those hippies mean when they say, "Oh, wear life like a loose garment." I'm like, go smoke some more grass and drop some more acid, dirty. But it's like, how do I get flexible in my thinking? And like you said, kind of meet people where they're at, let them be.
I think also, when I go to an Al-Anon meeting and there's a reading about black and white thinking, it's a reminder, it's a cue. I mean, I try to, I've been in Al-Anon for a long time. I do individual therapy. I do a lot of reading. I'm active in service in Al-Anon, and so I am constantly being reminded of, these things like black and white thinking. And so that helps, like to stay aware and if you are aware, you can correct it and bring yourself into a calmer place, But and I have a sponsor, and my sponsor also helps me with when I'm having black and white thinking. But I think, other things is that people you can practice. You can practice being gray, if you're not used to being gray and you're used to having black and white thinking and people tell you that or you get some feedback or you have some thought that maybe you might have black and white thinking, it's good to practice thoughts of gray,
It really is.
that's
One of the ways I've done it with a coworker, this is years ago. And it was just a pretty cool arrangement, kind of unspoken. I think both of us handle work pretty well. And then would use about once a week, sometimes more, sometimes less, to just kind of vent. I had a new boss and all this stuff. And either he'd be outraged and come to my office or I'd do the same to him. And we would allow each other to complain. And then the other one would jump on top of it, commiserate, co-sign it, agree with our own story, my story of how I was relating to him and how this person screwed us over too. And then one or the other ones of us would always just kind of determine when this little session would end. And the way we would end it would be like, thank you for being there for me. We both chose to work here, which escapes me in black and white thinking. No one has a gun to my head making me work in this environment that I'm pissed off about, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gratitude.
Exactly. And so I think those are some of the things, and you've mentioned, some of the buzzwords that might help us realize we're in black and white thinking. That's why I love the kind of resentment work I was introduced to. Because they're like, who you mad at and why? Then I get to let them have it. If I stop there, like, I'm never gonna get better. Then you look further at, what are the molds and the demands of the world that I put on it and of myself? How is this affecting me? And one of the keys, I think, to getting out of black and white thinking is gratitude. And the way that works would be I'm mad at her because she didn't listen to me. She said she was going to pay the bill and she didn't. She has the same argument over and over and over again. She said she was going to do this and she didn't, right? And she called me Mr. Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda. And she got mad at me for taking her food. But, I put the food on the fucking table. So I'm allowed to think all those things. If I want to get free, I could say all those things. And I could say, and she's a great cook. And she listens to me when I'm in pain. And rather than she's all bad, right?
You know what? Those kinds of things are really amazing. I do that, when I am getting frustrated with my partner because of black and white thinking, and then I start thinking about all the wonderful things about her. It's amazing and how grateful I am to have her in my life. It's a total attitude adjustment, and I'm grounded. My anxiety goes away, my anger goes away, the resentments go away, and I'm back to where I was, where I want to be.
And that's what's awesome. Then I'm free. And again, it doesn't excuse bad behavior, but the and the gratitude kind of help get a more proper perspective. And if I'm still upset, then maybe I could write this pro con list of this person or this relationship. But most of us just kind of do the surface work because it's easier, if that, and then continue with these same patterns. And I become like this resentful victim or become really passive aggressive. And I'm like, oh, I'm not willing to really end the relationship, but I'm going to keep being upset with you. And then when I finally act bad enough that you end it, I'm going to be outraged because you, like everybody else, have abandoned me, And some gratitude, a pro con list, kind of looking at my expectations of others. Those are the ways I can turn that down.
And a lot of that is through the work of journaling. You
Yeah.
know, Because in journaling, you really can become aware of your black and white thinking. And also, when you start writing a gratitude list and it brings you back to earth, you can see how you can easily get back to a place of serenity. And I think that's important because, the thing about the black and white thinking and the all or nothing thinking is it's going to limit your ability to be emotionally intimate with people in your life. And I mean, people that are in recovery, which we're doing this podcast for people that are in recovery, and people in recovery, I think that they really want intimacy. They want to have a fuller life, and I think that black and white thinking really limits a person's ability to be intimate with another being because you're so full of anxiety, anger, and resentment.
Yeah.
You can't
A lot
relate.
of stuff we've talked about in previous podcasts is I grow up thinking that way. The world does look like it's absolutes. You tell a lie, you're going to get hit. If you try to stand up for yourself, you're going to be ignored or whatever it is. So it just carries on into adulthood. And I think it's important to look at these simple things like, could I have a cue? Where am I seeing this black and white? Even just being curious about it.
That black and white thinking is just like another block in your cell, your jail cell from the bondage of self. I mean, you're just blocking yourself in from
Yeah.
a fuller life and in connection with other humans.
Yeah. So I think like the one journaling, gratitude are two ways to do it. The other one is like if I could just almost like over the top try to catch myself when I say but and then change it to and, even if I'm journaling.
That's a great one.
Is journal from the heart, da, 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 but and then I don't like to read my journals. Just getting it out kind of is enough puke for me.
That's so true.
Because usually it's only like there's a couple of A's and ands and thes, and then the rest of it is all profanity, just like, Yes. But even if I was able to catch myself saying "but" 1 out of the next 20 times and changing it to an "and," it's just kinda getting into my awareness and then play it out. I mean, CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, they talk about behavioral experiments and try it out, you know? But, we just kinda like someone told us once, they're like, "You guys are right about everything, aren't you?" We're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, that's great." But look what's happened, and look where you're sitting right now, being told when to go to bed, when to get up. You're at a treatment center paying a lot of money, and some people they think that's dismissive and not good counseling. And it might not be, but I need to be jarred awake. And I think most people do. And I can get lulled into this idea I don't have black and white thinking. Or because I'm right, it's not black and white thinking. There's no gray. And then usually when this gets brought up, people will go to like, well, what about pedophilia? I'm like, okay, maybe in that case it is black.
Yeah, that's pretty black and white.
Or, those people might be sick and they might be that way because something happened to them. But I'm like, it's like, that's where we go. Someone tells me, JD, you're dishonest. And I'm like, well, here's how I was honest. Or JD, you only care about yourself. I'm like, well, here's who I donated to. I'm like, ew. So, yeah, I think the gratitude to see the whole picture might be the easiest, not easiest, but the most accessible way. And again, it's a cue to realize what I'm saying, but, or I'm in resentment or anger.
Yeah, I think so too. And I also think, in this podcast, we're talking about the bondage of self. And it's really it's about self. It's not about the other person, and Al-Anon, a lot of people come to Al-Anon because they're in a relationship with an alcoholic, either a child, their parent is an alcoholic, their partner is an alcoholic, their adult child is an alcoholic, and they blame their misery on the other person. But we're talking about self and how you can change to improve your own quality of life. And that's really, hopefully, a very empowering thing. Like becoming aware of your black and white thinking, doing something simple, like you said, changing a but to and, doing some journaling, doing a gratitude list is a total game changer on your own quality of life. And it's very empowering because you've taken control on your life. It's a
Power.
wonderful thing. Yeah.
It's a huge shift because I think the other people are taking my power rather than I'm giving it away.
Right.
How do I get power back? Not by jamming my ideas down their throat. That never seems to work, but by changing my reaction, the way I'm seeing the world. Yeah. 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 It's empowerment. That's what this is about.
Mm. Yeah. And taking care of ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thank you, Rhonda.
Peace, man. Ciao.
Ciao.